Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Marisa Walz. Marisa is a Federal Reserve executive who also writes novels about people behaving badly. She lives in the Chicago suburbs with her husband and 2 young children, and Good Intentions is her debut novel. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be talking to you today.
Well, I had such a blast. Plus, I have to say, if you're listening to us and not watching, you got to go check out the cover of Good Intentions because it's just, they did a gorgeous job with this.
Oh,
I
I'm in love
love.
with the cover. Yes.
I know. And when you have a good cover, it's the best. So, before we dig into all the fun things about Good Intentions, tell us about the story.
Okay, so Good Intentions is a psychological suspense novel about a luxury event planner who becomes obsessed with a woman she meets in a hospital waiting room on the same day that she loses her twin sister. So it's a story about grief and obsession and moral ambiguity and about the way loss just can completely warp our sense of reality. And my main character, Katie, has just lost her twin sister at the start of the story. It's a tragedy that's revealed in the first couple of pages. And it just sends Katie off on this wild journey of trying to cope with that loss. And suffice it to say, she does not cope well.
That's sort of the understatement. So before we started talking, there's so many things I want to talk about because also a debut is, so exciting and there's all, nerve-wracking and all those things. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about Katie and her sister because I think that we all sort of have a little natural, I don't know if you have twins in your family, but we all have this sort of obsession about twins, I feel like, because it's such a bizarre and unique relationship, right? There's this how close they can be, but also sort of this competition and Katie sort of we explore that not by knowing Katie's sister, of course, because she's already gone, but by knowing her in hindsight. But the idea of all the ways in which the two women were super close and also the conflict between them. So um do you have how did you do that research? Did this was the idea about twins from the get-go?
Yeah, so I actually don't have any twins in my family, but I I just have always been a little bit fascinated by it, like other people, because I mean, I feel like it's really one of those things that you don't know until you experience. But I have had a couple really close friendships that felt kind of like this soulmate, like we like got each other and like we're on this like wavelength. And I can only imagine that that's probably like not even close to
Yeah.
what being a twin is like. So I've always just been kind of fascinated by that relationship. And I always knew Katie was going to be just very intense. And I'm just trying to picture, like what kind of loss or tragedy would really, you know, really make somebody like this spiral. Because I kind of knew who Katie was, and so then I needed to give her somebody, a foil, if you will, um, to kind of match her and challenge her. And I just thought, man, if you had somebody who's as obsessive and intense as Katie, and she had a twin, which it seems like just a very intense natural relationship, right? Like that's got to be like so explosive and just full, like just ripe of contention. So um, that's kind of where the idea came from. And then I did do a little research, but a lot of it is just me kind of taking liberties. And I have friends that are twins. I have a lot of friends who have twin children now. There's seems that there's a lot more reproductive technology and stuff is I
Yes.
think seeing more and more multiples. So yeah, I had a little bit of insight there and did a little research, but a lot of it is just kind of like me imagining what that relationship might look like. And I think Katie and Dana's is probably a little different than most twins because they're just, well, I don't know, they're just so different. And I would think if I were a twin, knowing my personality, I think I would just stubbornly kind of be different than the other one, like just want to prove that I am my own person. So
Well,
that's where a lot of the perspective comes for both women.
I love that. So it sounds like maybe at the very beginning, Katie wasn't necessarily a twin. Dana was developed to be sort of like, as you said, that's sort of the mirror of Katie. And there is
Yeah.
this sort of, my dad was an identical twin, and there is this sort of twin A, twin B thing that happens, right? Where there is oftentimes one twin whose personality is quite forceful, and and then the second twin, ends up being sort of a little bit more of the softer, quieter, more mellow twin in order to sort of make room for that. It happens with, I think, with firstborns and secondborns too, sort of. But I love that because I do feel like Dana is, was the sort of more reasonable twin, and because she had to be, and and basically the two of them together sort of made, she was able to sort of keep Katie in check, and then when she's gone, of course, Katie, as you explained, kind of goes off the rails, which is so fun. And I love the event. I mean, the event planning business of it is such a, I mean, I don't know. You're obviously, that is not your business since you work for the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
But that's another kind of just like over the top. Like you have to be on all the time, all hours, highly these incredibly wealthy, but probably not always very reasonable humans that you're dealing with. So what a fun
Yeah.
job for her.
Yeah. And the main reason I gave her that job or something like that job is like part of what I love reading about books is I like being dipped into those other worlds. And I really like the juxtaposition of like this really gritty, terrible, dark story and then like against this glittery, like exciting background. An editor once like used the phrase with me, like I was trying to explain like why I was so drawn like to these dark stories, but these luxury settings. And she's like, it's part of the spectacle. And I loved that. And I'm like, yes, it's part of like what makes it. If it were just like an ordinary person living in a house like mine or like, it I guess it's not as like fun and exciting to me. I think it just really like kind of ramps up the stakes and the interest and
Plus, I think the idea of like juxtapositioning the grief of loss with like these really decadent celebratory parties where like
yeah,
the double or irises or no, the double orchids have to be
orchids.
just perfect. And if they're not perfect, then the whole thing is it's just like that sort of, it's like you said, it really puts into relief the grief, by sort of,
It does because none of that stuff really matters, but like it
oh,
seems to matter, right? And yeah, that's definitely like a theme in the story that Katie like starts to realize. She's like, yeah, I was once one of those people who thought it was really important to like send a letterpressed card when you know,
right.
somebody else passed away. And like, she's like, now all that stuff's stupid. I can't believe I ever cared about that sort of
Right.
stuff.
Because of course that's what grief does, right? It just flays us open, and it wipes away all the sort of, falsities of what we think it matters. I mean, what you wouldn't give to what you wouldn't give to give, just, bring Dana back. So, anyway, I thought that was glorious. And of course the twists are there, and we don't talk about those. No spoilers. So let's talk a little bit, if you will, about your experience as a debut author. So is Good Intentions the first novel you've written? Are there some buried in the backyard? I know everybody's stories. How did you decide from going from the Federal Reserve to, want to write a novel? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I have known I wanted to be an author since I was a little girl. I have a diary sitting right over here that documents I was such a nerdy little girl. And I had these diaries and journals, and in the front of one, I'm like, if I ever become a famous author, have my biographer read this book and write a story about my life. And then I like autographed it and I wrote the date and the time that I autographed it as if this was going to like as if I was going to be such a historically important author that people would need to know these details.
I love that.
Um so yeah, I
How
have
old were
known my
you?
whole life. Huh?
How old were you? I'm always curious.
I think I was like about 7.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so
Yeah.
you've always
Yeah.
wanted to be an author.
I've always known, but I also have this really like practical side to me. And my mother really like was once I was older and I was going to college, right? And she was paying for my college and she was like, well, I think you need to, focus on something more practical. And so I did, and I tried several different things, and I was actually going to be like an optometrist at one point, and that just kind of like I couldn't pass organic chemistry for the life of
Oh,
me.
Me too. I had a
It
similar.
wasn't my thing. I was trying to like force fit something that was not me. So eventually I ended up getting my MBA and I took a couple jobs and then ended up at the Fed and I've been at the Fed for like 13 years now. And I really like what I do. I have this very creative side to me that wants to write and that is my passion and what I wish I could do all day, every day. But I do have this other side of me that really just likes to be productive and get work done and so I do kind of like have two different buckets that I think kind of need filled. And so yeah, I really like what I do for my day job, but yeah, I mean, nobody grows up wanting to, be in credit risk management. Um,
Well,
but yeah, so
maybe not
yeah.
nobody, but right, I understand what you're saying. Um,
Right. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I started really getting serious. I had my son, and I just felt so overwhelmingly inspired. He was my first to really be a good example because I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't know what their thing is and like don't find it. And I was given the gift of like knowing what I wanted to do, and it seemed just like tragic to me that I would not pursue that. And then, what if my son had like a talent or a passion and like he felt afraid to go for it? I didn't want that. So I wanted to be a good example. So I was very inspired by becoming a mother and I started writing. So no, Good Intentions was not my first book. I don't think anybody will be too surprised to hear that. It was, I think, my fourth book that I've written, and the second one that I went on submission with. And yeah, I mean, so it seems in some ways to some people, it seems like an overnight success story because I went out on submission in the middle of the summer, mind you, on a Thursday. And on Monday, my editor, Sarah Canton, reached out to my agent and said, "Can I talk to Marisa?" And then the next day, we got an offer.
oh,
So
that.
people hear that and they're like, "Oh, that's where like the overnight stories come from." But like it was a 10-year
Yeah, you're like,
overnight
it
story.
was a 10-year overnight success. I think that's, but I do think, and I'm sure you agree that there's real value in those books that you write that don't go anywhere. Like I don't think you learn how to write a novel without writing a novel. So you can, some people write one book and they revise it, and maybe finally sell it. But then the next time they have to write a book, it's a much harder versus if you've already written four, right?
Yeah.
Now you're.
You can do it again, which is huge because now I'm really struggling with my second to be published book, which will be like the sixth book I've written now. And it's really hard, but like I know that I can write a book because I've done it 5 times already. And
Wow.
also, yes, I would never want my first book to be published. At the time, I wanted it to be
Yeah.
published, but in hindsight, I'm like, thank God nobody like was delusional that day and was like, this is a good book. We should publish it.
I love it. So how do you balance life? Because now you have two kids. Is that true?
I do. Hmm.
And your job and the writing. And so is there like and I actually do believe, I remember this from my own experience of working full time and having babies and writing, is that there is a little bit of a like, if you only have this much time, you kind of get a lot accomplished versus now I write full time and I'm much less
Yeah.
productive. But how do you how do you make that work?
Well, to be honest, like I don't balance it. It's always out of whack. I'm always like when I'm writing, like when I'm in the thick of writing, like I'm obsessed. And I could be like watching a movie with my family, but I'm not thinking about the movie. I'm thinking about the book. And yeah, like it feels like something is always suffering, to be perfectly honest. But I'm also one of those people I think that really thrives and is best when I have a little too much going on versus I will not be productive at all if I have all the time in the world. I kind of need that pressure. But at the same time, it would be nice to have a
A little
little
bit.
less
Yeah.
pressure. I would say my number one trick is I really hardly ever watch any TV.
Yeah.
And people would be surprised by how much extra time I think they have if they didn't. And the same with social media, probably. But I do a lot of social media because I really like to connect to book influencers and bookstores. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like finding something like TV or social media or something to like just cut that out, it really frees up so much time. I really only watch if we're having like a family movie night, or I do watch about an hour a day when I work out, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
that's
think
it.
that's right. I think it is about finding those little pockets of time you didn't know you had, whether it's a commute or while you're cooking dinner. And, but also it's like, part of writing a novel is sort of staring into space, which you can
Yes.
do, a lot of different ways, right?
Yeah. When people ask me how long it takes to write a book, I say, well, it takes me about 4 to 6 months to get it all straight in my head, no
Yeah.
writing. And then it takes me about 2 to 3 weeks to write the first draft of a book.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That is intense.
Because I get obsessed. Like I said, I get obsessed.
Yeah. And so then are you just like writing at all hours and up
Yep.
late
On
and
the
up,
train, like you
yes,
said,
good for
yep, late
you.
at night, early in the morning. Yep.
That's amazing. So, okay, so what's the process for you of the sort of figuring out in your head? It sounds like you're making notes as you're doing it. Are you just like, is it very much free form? And has it been consistent? Because I mean, you're writing book six, but it's only book six. So how does that,
Yeah. Well, it's not been consistent. So the first time I started writing a book, it was all vibes, no plan. I was just like, oh, it's gonna be so dark and creepy and like introspective. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was in my 20s and I just thought I was gonna write this super smart, witty book. And it was just going to be so deep and dark. And that's it. That's all I had going in. And of course, I became very frustrated and it went nowhere. And then I didn't pick it up again until my early 30s when I had my son. And then I was like, I'm going in with a plan. And so I didn't start writing until I had like a plan for a story. And then I wrote it. And then I still very much have to have a pretty solid plan. I don't have to have every chapter written out, but it's every book has been different so far. But I think I may laugh at myself in a few years looking back, but I think I found what works for me now.
Okay.
And that is first to get it straight in my head and to like wait for that, oh yes, 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 I can't wait to tell this story feeling. And then I'll start generally plotting it out. And then when I start writing, I have to have like the general plan. I have to know like two-thirds of the chapters or the scenes pretty much.
Okay.
And then I'll start writing it out. And what I found works really well for me because endings are so important to me. I write the first chapter and then I write the last chapter. And then this is so crazy because like I'm such a by like the book chronological order person. Um, I have found that just if I know the whole story, it doesn't matter what I order I write it in too much. I'll try and go back to chapter two and then write in order. But if I'm not feeling chapter two, I'll go to chapter three. If I feel really inspired to write chapter 17, I'll write it now.
That's amazing. So
Um,
you must have like an outline of kind of what are the
yes.
main chapters, and then do you find they change a lot as you
Yep.
get back to them?
Yep. That's one of my favorite parts is like the stuff that crops up like organically as you're writing. You're like, ooh, this is gonna make a little bit of a mess of things, but I've got this idea now. I gotta go weave it back in. That's
Yeah,
really exciting.
that's so fun. So you are letting you're not sort of rigid with your outline. You're more
No,
like
I definitely have to have
suggestion.
a plan, like some
Yeah.
sort of map, but I totally leave it open to whatever pops up along the way.
I love that. So tell us about what it's like to write now. So you've written about your books. This is not new to you, although obviously, I mean, 17 books in, and the process still changes. So I think
Yeah.
that's normal. But what's it like to sort of? Is there a different type of pressure now writing a book that you know has sold? And so
Yep.
yeah, so you're like, yes, there
It's
definitely is.
yeah, I
Tell us
mean,
about that.
this might be the hardest book I feel I've ever written. So I've rewritten it in its entirety 3 times already. And I was like talking with another author friend the other day. I'm like, if it's this difficult, does that mean I should just stop? Am I forcing something? But there are so many parts of this book that I love and I just want to get it right. And my editor is just very knowledgeable, has great intuition about stories. And so I really trust her. And like she seems confident that this is going to be a good book. And we're like getting there and it's getting better. So that's better. But I do think part of the problem was like being in my head and trying to write a book for um a specific person. Like as I'm writing, I'm thinking, will my editor, this specific person, like it versus like writing what I want? And I know she wouldn't want me to do that, but it's really hard to separate those two things. And another thing that I think was problematic was I've stopped doing this now, but I was reading my reviews as they were coming in. And then I was like, oh, I got to remember not to do that in a book ever again. And ooh, and you just, it's just so creatively stifling. If it was actually a major problem, then one of the many editors, copy editors, and agents that looked at this book would have. So you just gotta kind of like let some of that go. But I think it's easier said than done. But it's
Oh,
definitely book two is the struggle is real.
the struggle is real. So how are you? Where are you in it? Are doing a hopefully the last revision kind of thing?
I think I'm doing the last major revision right now because we're very aligned on like the things that weren't working and the plan for going forward, but it's going to be messy. Like this is honestly my least favorite part of writing. I love writing the first draft with a clean slate. I love when like all the plot and character development is working and then you just go back and make the prose like just a little bit better each line. Like I could do that forever, make each line a tiny bit better. That's my favorite thing. The big messy developmental edits, it's brutal because you change one thing, but it changes so many other things in the story that you've got to go back and fix. And it's just so messy. And I don't like mess. I'm a Virgo. So
You're like, this is not comfortable for me. Yeah.
no.
Well, so what would you, we've got a lot of aspiring authors who listen to the show. And I always try to like give them some sort of, offer some sort of piece of advice. What would you suggest if you were sort of talking to the, Marisa of, starting out, what would be a couple things you would tell her?
Like in this industry, you can't give up. The number one thing is perseverance and discipline. And uh, you can learn almost anything else. And if you have a true passion for it, like you'll get better at it and you'll be good to it, and somebody will vibe with you, and like that'll all happen. You just gotta keep going and have faith that it'll happen. You've got to be a little bit delusional. But I would say, like day-to-day writing, like I give myself this advice every day and have to remind myself just do a little something.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's fixing one sentence, like just be in the habit of like doing a little bit. I don't care if it's like thinking on the train going into work, like and trying to like think through and solve a problem. Even if you don't solve the problem, you're that much closer because you've already, thought through some things. Like just chew off, like bite off a little bit every single day.
Yeah, I do
That's
think I make this, people who've listened to the show have heard this analogy before, but I feel like it's like having a friend who's in crisis. When you have a friend who's going through something really awful, you sort of check in with her daily. And I think it's sort of like that, right? Because then you're just like, how was today? How are you doing today? Are you feeling better? Are you feeling the same? Is it worse? And just those little check-ins kind of keep everything kind of top of mind and you don't lose track. Because I think that
yeah.
the hardest thing is to go a week or so without working on a book and then be like,
Yes.
whose book is this and what's it
Well,
about?
then the anxiety builds up. Like the longer I'm away from like a project, the anxiety really builds up and like gets my confidence down because I'm like, well, I've been away from it this long, so it must be really hard and unsolvable. Whereas if you're like chewing off a little bit each day, it's different and it feels doable. And then you'd be surprised that like all of a sudden, like something just clicks that day and all of a sudden you get like two chapters written after weeks of like struggling on like one sentence and you just never know when that moment's going to hit, so you've really just got to put in the time.
It's
And
great. Yeah.
it really is about the consistency and like doing something each day more than it is how much you're doing each day.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like people have these like, I write 1,000 words a day or
Nah,
whatever.
I don't, not too much pressure.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot of pressure. Can you tell us any little thing about the second book? I mean, and you can say no, but is there anything you're loving about it?
Okay, so the one thing I'm loving about it is that there are a ton of interstitials. And so for those that don't know, those are just like little, I mean, they could be like letters, they could be newspaper articles or whatever, just these little like extra, I call them artifacts, that you add into the book. And I think maybe these are a little polarizing. Some people love them and some people don't. When they're done really well, I absolutely love them. I was so right before I read We Used to Live Here, right before I started writing this
Yeah.
book. And I think his name was Marcus something. I can't
Marcus
remember.
Clymer,
Yes.
I have that book. Yeah, that's a creepy book.
Yeah, speculative is not normally my thing, but I really enjoyed it. And one of my favorite things about it was the Reddit threads that he would weave through. It just seemed so real and authentic. And I was really inspired to do that. And so mine doesn't have a specific like, oh, it's letters, it's Reddit threads, it's kind of all over the place. I've got like Goodreads posts, it's about an author, and text message chains and things like that. And there's still a lot of narrative, but like every third or fourth chapter, maybe I have the interstitials, and my editor encouraged me to put more in because she's like, I can tell that you enjoyed writing these because they are so much fun to write. And I was like, I do. It's like I get to be somebody else for just that little chapter, and I just love it. And I'm reading The Correspondent right now, which have you read it yet?
I just
I'm about halfway through, and yeah, I'm just like, I got to do something like this, I think. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
inspired.
Well, and I do think it's really fun. I think actually it's also really, it's a kind of a, like you said, it's a fun sort of break from the narrative for the author as well. And I think the readers can tell when you've done something you really have enjoyed, that there's a lot of,
Yeah.
fun to something. Well, that's super exciting. Well, tell us, Marisa, where can people follow you online and see where you're going to be? I know you're doing some tour events for Good Intentions. So what's the best way to seek you out?
Um, so my website has everything, including all my social media handles and my tour dates. That's marisawalz.com with one S and one R. And I'm most active probably on Instagram, and my handle is at Marisa C. Walls.
And Walls is WALZ for those people who
Yep.
are listening to us and can't see. Super fun. Well, we will be giving away a copy of Good Intentions either over on Danielle's Killer Women page on Facebook or at Killer Women Podcast on Instagram. So go and follow Marisa and look for this gorgeous cover and this super fun book. It was really fun to chat with you today.
I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Everyone, we will see you next time on Killer Women. Bye.